Get out of my seat before I make a call that ends your little day trip." Marcus Caldwell had not even folded his garment bag into the overhead bin when the voice hit him, sharp as a slammed door. He turned, slow, and found a woman in a cream silk blazer standing in row 2 with her phone already raised, not to call anyone, just to make sure he saw it. Diane Whitfield was 54 years old, with a blunt blonde bob and a string of pearls so tight against her throat they looked like a leash she'd put on herself. She had flown this route, Denver to Charlotte, every other Thursday for 6 years, and in her mind that had purchased her, something the airline's own computer system would never agree to. She looked Marcus over in under 2 seconds. Gray hoodie, faded jeans, a canvas duffel with a cracked leather handle that had belonged to his father. Then she made her decision, the way people like her always did, before any facts arrived to slow her down. "I have a boarding pass that says 2A, Marcus said. His voice did not rise. It never did. Years of board meetings had taught him that the loudest person in the room is usually the one who has already lost the argument and knows it. Diane laughed, a short, dry sound with no warmth in it. "Sweetheart, I don't know what discount site sold you that seat, but I sit here every single week. Ask anyone." A flight attendant came down the aisle at the sound of raised voices, though only one voice had actually been raised. Her name tag read Jessica Moore, 31, auburn hair scraped into a bun, so tight it looked like it hurt. "Is there a problem?" she asked, and her eyes did the same quick inventory Diane's had done. Hoodie, jeans, duffel bag. Before Marcus had said a single word, Jessica's expression had already half decided who the problem was. "This man is in my seat," Diane said, and the wording landed exactly the way she intended it to. "Not the seat, my seat." Marcus heard it. So did the businessman 2 rows back, who had lowered his newspaper just enough to watch over the top of it. Marcus held out his phone, boarding pass glowing on the screen, 2A. Jessica took it, scanned it, and her professional smile cracked at the corner, just barely, the way ice cracks before anyone hears it. Then Diane shoved her own phone forward. "Check mine too. There's clearly been some mix-up on your end." Jessica's thumb hovered. The truth sat right there on the screen in plain block letters. Diane Whitfield, seat 3C. Marcus Caldwell, seat 2A. Jessica's mouth opened. Nothing came out for a second. Then she did the thing that would haunt her for the rest of that flight, the thing that small, frightened compromises always do. "Sir," she said, turning her whole body toward Marcus instead of Diane, "would you mind taking 3C just for today? Same cabin, same service. I promise I'll have someone bring you a drink right away." Marcus did not move. A baby fussed somewhere behind the curtain. Someone's rolling bag squeaked against the carpet. And Marcus Caldwell, founder and chief executive of Vance Meridian Technologies, the company whose software ran the boarding gates, the loyalty platforms, and the crew scheduling systems for nearly half the regional carriers in the country, looked at the seat he had paid full fare for 3 weeks earlier and felt something old and familiar settle into his chest. They were not asking him for a favor. They were asking him to disappear quietly, the way they always asked people like him to disappear quietly, so the day could keep moving without friction for everyone except him. "I'm sorry," he said softly. "Did you just confirm on that screen that this is my seat, and then ask me to give it away anyway?" Jessica's grip on the tablet tightened until her knuckles went pale. "I'm only trying to keep boarding moving, sir." "No," Marcus said. "You're trying to keep her comfortable." Diane's chin lifted half an inch, the universal signal of a person bracing to win an argument by volume rather than fact. "Excuse me?" Marcus turned to her, and something in his stillness made the air around them feel smaller, the way a hallway feels smaller right before a door slams. "You're in the wrong seat. You know it. She knows it. Everyone close enough to hear already knows it." Across the aisle, a man in a leather jacket stopped scrolling his phone, thumb frozen mid-swipe. An older couple in row 3 traded a glance loaded with the particular discomfort of people who'd rather not get involved, but couldn't quite look away either. A second flight attendant arrived from the galley, drawn by the gathering tension, the way smoke draws a fire crew. His tag read Tyler Briggs, 39, a tall man with a jaw that stayed clenched even when he smiled, which he did now badly. "What's the issue here, folks?" Diane spoke first, because Diane always spoke first. "This man is refusing to be reasonable. I've been flying first class on this route for years, and I am being treated like a criminal." Tyler's eyes slid to Marcus. "There's a seating mix-up," Jessica said quickly, before he could form his own opinion. "His pass says 2A, hers says 3C, but Mrs. Whitfield is one of our most loyal Flowfare flyers, and I was hoping we could find a compromise to keep things moving." Tyler nodded, slowly, like a man being handed a script he intended to follow without reading it first. "Sir," he said to Marcus, his tone smoothing out into something practiced and hollow, "we really do appreciate flexible passengers. Sometimes we ask folks to be accommodating for the good of the whole cabin." Marcus's voice dropped, quiet enough that people leaned in without realizing they were doing it. Flexible means both people bend. This looks like only one person being asked to fold. Tyler's jaw worked. Around them, 3 or 4 phones had begun rising, slow and almost shy. At first, the way people film things they aren't sure they're allowed to film. A woman with silver hair in row 3 leaned to her husband and whispered something that made him nod once, hard. "Are we really going to delay an entire aircraft over one seat?" Diane snapped, looking around for an audience that had not yet decided whose side it was on. Marcus looked down at the boarding pass, still glowing faintly in his hand. One seat. That was what people like her always called it, when the cost wasn't theirs to pay. One seat, one exception, one small, practiced humiliation, swallowed so someone else could keep her morning undisturbed. He looked back at Tyler. "We are not delaying this plane over a seat," he said. "We're delaying it because your crew keeps asking the wrong person to move." Tyler's expression shifted then, not into understanding, but into something colder. The look of a man who has decided this conversation is now a problem to be managed rather than a wrong to be fixed. "Sir," he said, stepping closer, "once a crew member gives an instruction, we expect cooperation. That is, not optional. An instruction has to be lawful and reasonable," Marcus said. "Asking me to surrender a seat I legally hold because another passenger prefers it is neither." The words landed harder than shouting would have, precisely because there was no heat in them at all. Tyler felt it, the way you feel a draft before you find the open window. This man did not sound like someone guessing his rights from a half-remembered article online. He sounded like someone who read contracts before breakfast. Jessica touched Tyler's sleeve. "Maybe we should just ask Mrs. Whitfield to move to her assigned seat," she said quietly. Diane's head whipped around so fast, her pearls clicked against each other. "Excuse me?" Tyler ignored Jessica entirely, which told Marcus everything he needed to know about how authority worked on this aircraft. "Mr. Caldwell," he said, "I'm going to offer this once more. Seat 3C is available. We'll provide a travel credit and a formal apology once we land." After landing, Marcus repeated. "So the apology comes after I've already given up what was mine." "Don't make this harder than it needs to be," Tyler said, lower now, almost gentle, which made it worse, because Marcus had heard that exact phrasing before, in boardrooms, in hotel lobbies, at restaurant host stands his whole life, dressed up as politeness while doing the work of a threat. Marcus thought of his father, Daniel Caldwell, a transit mechanic in Detroit who had worn the same cracked work boots for 11 years. So his son could finish engineering school without loans hanging over him like weather. He thought of his mother ironing shirts at midnight, telling him in that low, steady voice of hers, "Baby, dignity is quiet, right up until somebody tries to take it from you." and then it isn't quiet anymore. Marcus set his duffel bag down beside seat 2A. "I'm taking my seat," he said. Diane stepped sideways to block the row with her whole body, perfume cutting sharp through the recycled cabin air. "You are not climbing over me like some kind of animal." The word landed across the cabin like a slap. No one had heard coming. Tyler flinched. Jessica's mouth fell open. The man filming in row 4 whispered, "Oh my God," low enough that the microphone still caught it. The silver-haired woman pressed a hand flat against her chest. Her husband muttered, "That's enough," loud enough for 3 rows to hear. Marcus went still. Not frightened still. The kind of stillness that arrives right before a verdict gets read aloud. "Say that again," he said. Diane's face flickered, the half-second, where even she understood. She had gone somewhere. She couldn't easily walk back from. But pride is a strange kind of prison. It locks the door from the inside and hands you the only key. "I said you're being aggressive," she corrected, too late, and everyone in earshot knew it. "That is not what you said," Marcus answered. Tyler tried to recover ground that had already slid out from under him. "All right, everyone just needs to calm down." Marcus turned to him slowly. "Don't tell everyone to calm down when only one person in this cabin just said something inhuman." The plane was fully awake now. Phones up. Breath held. Somewhere near the back, a child asked his grandmother what was happening, and she had no answer for him either. Tyler reached for the handset mounted near the galley. "Captain Holloway," he said, eyes locked on Marcus the whole time. "We need you up front. We have a passenger refusing crew instruction." Marcus gave a small, calm nod, as if some invisible clock had just been started by someone else's hand. "Good," he said. Jessica looked at him, confused by how unbothered he seemed. Because Marcus Caldwell understood something neither of them did yet. The captain was not going to be the end of this. He was only going to be the first witness. Captain David Holloway stepped out of the cockpit the way men who have spent 30 years being obeyed always do. Like a man walking into a room he already expects to control. 56 years old, silver at the temples, 4 stripes on each sleeve. The kind of unhurried gait that assumes the floor itself will get out of his way. The cabin softened around him on instinct, the way rooms always soften for the uniform, whether or not the uniform deserves it. "Captain, we have a passenger refusing crew instruction in first class," Tyler said, before anyone else could speak. Marcus listened to the sentence land. Refusing crew instruction, not defending his seat, not responding to a word that should never be spoken to anyone on any aircraft ever. The entire story compressed down into one tidy phrase, clean enough to justify almost anything that came after it. Holloway's eyes moved over, Marcus first, lingering a half-second too long on the hoodie, the jeans, the worn duffel bag, before sliding to Diane's pearls and cream blazer, where they relaxed visibly. He believed he was being neutral. He was not, and some part of him would understand that later, when it was already too expensive to take back. "What seems to be the trouble here?" the captain asked. Diane got there first, voice trembling now, though not from fear, from performance. "Captain, thank God, I've been trying to sit in my usual seat, and this man has become hostile. He's making the entire cabin uncomfortable." From row 3, the silver-haired woman sat forward. "That isn't true, Captain." Diane did not even glance at her. "He's been confrontational since the moment he boarded." Marcus stood perfectly still through all of it. The calm bothered Diane far more than anger would have, and some distant part of her already knew why, though she would never have admitted it out loud. Holloway turned to Jessica. "Records," he said. Jessica's hands shook as she passed over the tablet. Guilt had fully arrived on her face now, the particular guilt of someone who had known the truth from the first 30 seconds and chosen comfort over it anyway. Holloway studied the screen, brow tightening. "Mrs. Whitfield, your assigned seat is 3C." "Captain, I fly this route every other week," she said. "Everyone knows I prefer 2A. "That may be," Holloway said, his voice firmer now, "but 2A belongs to Mr. Caldwell." The cabin exhaled, a small collective sound, relief tangled up with disbelief. Marcus did not move. He had learned a long time ago never to celebrate justice that arrived this late, because late justice still carried the bill for everything it cost on the way there. Tyler shifted his weight. "Sir, we were only trying to avoid a delay by asking the man with the correct seat to move," Holloway finished for him, his tone going flat. "She had special circumstances," Tyler said. "What special circumstances?" Marcus asked, and the question cut clean through the cabin. Nobody answered. Nobody could. Holloway looked at Marcus then, really looked, past the hoodie and the duffel bag this time, into his face. There was no panic there, no desperate need to be believed. Just a controlled, patient cold that made the captain quietly uneasy, in a way 30 years of flying had not prepared him for. "Mr. Caldwell," he said, "I apologize for the confusion. Please, take your seat." Diane made a small choking sound. "You cannot be serious." "I am completely serious, ma'am. This is outrageous. I am a platinum-tier flyer. I spend thousands of dollars with this airline every single year." Marcus stepped to the side and rested one hand on the back of seat 2A, then. "Sit in the seat you paid for," he said. A murmur ran through the cabin. Someone whispered, finally. Diane's face twisted into something raw and ugly, the mask finally slipping all the way off. People always make everything about race." The cabin went silent in a different way now, heavier, the kind of silence that has weight and takes up physical space. Holloway's eyes narrowed. "Mrs. Whitfield." "What?" she snapped. "Everyone's thinking it. I'm just the one saying it." Jessica closed her eyes. Tyler stared at the carpet. The phones lifted higher than before, and Marcus felt the old familiar heat rise behind his ribs, the kind he had spent 20 years learning not to let drive the car. He had negotiated with billion-dollar clients who smiled warmly while sharpening knives under the table. He understood, better than almost anyone in that cabin, the difference between anger and power. Anger wants to shout. Power can afford to wait. He reached into his jacket and slid out his phone. A single notification glowed on the lock screen. Board briefing moved to emergency channel. "Awaiting your signal." Jessica caught only the first 2 words and her stomach dropped straight through the floor of the aircraft. Captain Holloway noticed the shift in her face immediately. "Mr. Caldwell," he asked carefully, "is there something else I should know?" Marcus slid the phone back into his pocket. "Yes, Captain," he said, "but not yet." Diane laughed, bitter and sharp. "Oh, now he's important." Marcus turned to her, his voice low enough that the entire cabin leaned forward to catch it. "No, Mrs. Whitfield. I was important long before you decided I wasn't worth checking." For the first time since the seatbelt sign had come on, Diane Whitfield looked genuinely afraid. She stared at him as if the carpeted floor under her designer flats had quietly tilted. The phrase did not sound like pride. It sounded like a sentence being carved into stone, slow and permanent. It moved through the cabin, touching every raised phone, every crew member who had spent the last several minutes pretending this was only about logistics. "Mrs. Whitfield," Captain Holloway said, "you need to move to 3C now." Diane's hand tightened around her phone until her knuckles went white. For the first time, the armor cracked all the way through, pearls and silk, and practiced confidence, suddenly looking very small under the weight of 40 witnesses. "I want his full name," she said. "I want to file a complaint." "You already have it," Marcus said. "You heard the captain confirm my boarding pass out loud." "Marcus Caldwell," she repeated, like the syllables themselves had teeth. A flicker crossed Tyler's face, small, almost nothing, but Jessica caught it, and so did the captain. Tyler's eyes dropped to the tablet, then back up to Marcus, then down again, Like a man searching a dark room for a light switch he was suddenly terrified to find. Jessica's fingers moved across the screen, pulling up the passenger profile. Loyalty history. Corporate notes. Her face changed color before she could stop it, the blood draining out in one slow wave. Captain Holloway noticed. "Jessica." "Captain," she said, voice barely above a whisper. "There's a corporate flag on his account." Diane scoffed. "Oh, please." Jessica kept reading. "Executive tier. Restricted access. Do not alter seat assignment without authorization from corporate relations." The cabin's silence sharpened into something nearly physical. Tyler's jaw flexed. "That can't be right." "It is," Marcus said. Captain Holloway stepped closer, reading over Jessica's shoulder, his eyes hardening, not at Marcus now, but at the situation turning over in his hands like a live wire he hadn't realized he was holding. "Mr. Caldwell," he said slowly, "would you care to explain?" Marcus looked toward the small oval window beside 2A. Outside, the late afternoon sun burned gold across the wing. He had planned to spend this flight reviewing acquisition documents, not teaching a cabin full of strangers what dignity looked like under pressure. But some lessons choose their own classroom. "Not yet, Captain," Marcus said. "First, Mrs. Whitfield needs to leave my seat." Diane gave a brittle laugh. "You think some mystery corporate flag scares me?" "No," Marcus said. "I think the truth does." A passenger near row 4 whispered into his phone while still recording. "This just got serious, man. They found something on his account." Diane heard him and snapped her head around. "Stop filming me. You were fine when everyone was filming him," the silver-haired woman said. That single sentence landed harder than any argument had. Diane turned, stunned. "I beg your pardon." "You heard me," the older woman said, her voice shaking but not breaking. "You sat there happily while they tried to push him out of his own seat. Now that the story's turning, suddenly you want privacy." Jessica lowered the tablet partway, as if the screen itself had become dangerous to hold up. "Mr. Caldwell, I owe you an apology." "Not yet," Marcus said. Jessica flinched, not because the words were cruel, but because they were fair. An apology offered too early is just a broom sweeping glass under a rug. Captain Holloway turned back to Diane. "Ma'am, this is no longer a discussion. Move to 3C immediately, or I will have ground staff assist you off this aircraft entirely." Her mouth opened. Nothing came out. For the first time in longer than she could remember, Diane Whitfield had no audience left willing to perform for her. The same passengers who had quietly watched Marcus get questioned now watched her with cold, open attention. She gathered her handbag, movements sharp with humiliation. As she stepped into the aisle, she leaned close enough for only Marcus to hear. "People like you always love making a scene." His eyes did not blink. "And people like you," he said, "always love calling accountability a scene." Diane froze. Holloway heard it. Jessica heard it. Tyler heard it. And deep inside the airline's private corporate network, Marcus's phone buzzed again. This time a message from his general counsel. "Board is live. Say the word." It buzzed a second time, a third. Marcus did not look at it immediately, and that alone unsettled Holloway more than anything said so far, because most people check an urgent message the instant it arrives. Marcus treated it like something he had already known was coming, long before this aircraft ever pushed back from the gate. Diane finally walked the few short rows to seat 3C, and the walk looked much longer than it was. Every eye tracked her. The same cabin that had silently accepted her version of events 20 minutes earlier now watched her with open judgment. Her shoulders stayed rigid. Her heels struck the floor harder with each step. When she dropped into 3C, the armrests shook from the force of it. "This is unbelievable," she muttered. The silver-haired woman answered without turning around. "No." What was unbelievable was watching them try to take his seat. Diane's face went the color of a bruise. Captain Holloway remained standing beside Marcus, 33 years of reading turbulence behind his eyes, the kind of experience that let a man spot trouble before passengers ever felt the first bump. He knew how to read drunks, nervous flyers, angry businessmen, before they even opened their mouths. But Marcus Caldwell unsettled him for a different reason entirely. Not because he was aggressive, because he wasn't. Men with real power rarely announced it. They simply waited, and Marcus had been waiting since the moment he boarded. "Mr. Caldwell," Holloway said quietly, "what exactly is your connection to this airline?" Jessica looked down. Tyler stopped pretending he wasn't listening. Even nearby passengers leaned in. Marcus finally unlocked his phone. The screen lit his face. A board conference call link. 3 missed calls, 6 messages, 1 marked highest priority. The sender's name made Jessica's stomach drop a second time. Vivian Marsh, General Counsel, Vance Meridian Technologies. Jessica knew that company. Everyone in airline operations knew that company. They built the reservation systems, the operational software, the gate scheduling tools, the customer service infrastructure running underneath half the regional carriers in the country. Captain Holloway noticed the look on her face. "Jessica." "Captain," she said, swallowing hard. "Vance Meridian manages a large piece of our infrastructure contracts." Tyler frowned. "What does that have to do with him?" Marcus looked up. "More than you think." Silence again. Pure, total silence. Even Diane stopped complaining. Marcus rose slowly from beside seat 2A. Not theatrical. Controlled. Every movement deliberate. The cabin felt smaller around him. Holloway instinctively stepped back half a pace. Not from fear, but instinct. The way power changes the geometry of a room without anyone deciding to let it. "I was supposed to spend this flight reviewing acquisition documents," Marcus said. "Instead, I spent the last 20 minutes being told I should give up my seat because it was more convenient for everyone else." Nobody spoke. Jessica's eyes filled. Tyler stared at the floor. "Do you know what bothered me most?" Marcus continued. "Not the seat. Not the insult. Not even the assumptions." His voice hardened. It was how quickly everyone here decided that fairness was negotiable. The words landed differently on every face in the cabin. The silver-haired woman nodded slowly. A man near row 4 lowered his phone for the first time in 10 minutes. Even Captain Holloway felt the sting, because he knew, with growing certainty, that Marcus was right. The problem had never really been Diane Whitfield. Few people like her existed on every flight, every day, everywhere. The real problem was how many trained professionals saw something wrong, unfolding right in front of them, and reached for the easiest answer instead of the right one. Marcus's phone buzzed again. This time he answered. The cabin caught only fragments. "Yes, I'm on board. No, not yet." His eyes moved briefly across Tyler, then Jessica, then Captain Holloway, then back toward the front of the plane. "Give me 5 minutes." The call ended. Holloway's pulse climbed. 5 minutes until what? Marcus looked out the window at the Colorado sun, bleeding gold across the wing. When he spoke again, his voice had gone almost gentle. 5 minutes before everyone on this aircraft understands why today's mistake is about to become the most expensive customer service failure this airline has dealt with in years. Nobody laughed. Nobody rolled their eyes. For the first time, every person in first class believed him completely. The cockpit door stood open behind Holloway, a narrow frame of switches and disciplined light. Beyond the windows, baggage carts crawled across the tarmac. Ground crews in orange vests moved beneath the wing, unaware that the real emergency on this aircraft had nothing to do with mechanics. Tyler tried to recover first. "Mr. Caldwell," he said, his voice thinner now, "I think this has gotten out of proportion. We can still make this right with some compensation." "Compensation is what you offer for a spilled drink," Marcus said. "Not for mishandled dignity." Tyler's lips pressed into a tight line. Jessica looked at Marcus as if she wanted to say something, but her throat wouldn't open. She remembered the exact moment she checked the seat assignments. She had known immediately. 2A was his. 3C was Diane's. The truth had never been complicated. Her failure had been the complication. Captain Holloway adjusted his cap under one arm. "Mr. Caldwell, are you saying Vance Meridian has an active business relationship with this airline?" "Yes." "What kind of relationship?" Marcus looked around the cabin at the raised phones, the watching faces, at Diane sitting rigid in 3C, pretending not to listen while listening to every single syllable. Operational systems. Customer identity verification. Loyalty platform integration. Gate scheduling support. Crew reporting tools. Passenger complaint analytics. Each phrase struck Tyler like a separate blow. Jessica's eyes went wide. "That's nearly our entire service stack." "Not nearly," Marcus said. "All of it." Holloway's jaw set. Diane gave a thin, nervous laugh. "This is absurd. Are we supposed to believe he runs all that?" The silver-haired woman turned in her seat. "Ma'am, I think it's time you stopped talking." Diane recoiled as if she'd been struck. Marcus reached into the side pocket of his duffel bag and pulled out a worn brown leather card holder, the same one his father had carried for 30 years, the leather cracked soft at the corners. He opened it slowly, not for theater, for precision, and handed a card to Captain Holloway. The captain read it aloud, his voice tightening with every word. "Marcus Caldwell, Founder and Chief Executive Officer, Vance Meridian Technologies." Beneath that, in smaller print, Strategic Infrastructure Partner, Liberty Sky Airlines. Holloway's face changed. Not fear. Exactly. Recognition. Pilots might not know every contractor's name, but captains knew which company logos sat in the corner of every training screen, every dispatch terminal, every gate display they relied on without thinking twice. Tyler leaned in close enough to read the card himself, mouth going dry. Jessica whispered, "Oh my God." Marcus did not enjoy their shock. That was what made it worse. He wasn't performing a victory lap. He was simply documenting the consequences, the way he had been trained to document everything, calmly and on the record. Vance Meridian currently supports this airline's reservation integrity platform across 51 domestic airports, Marcus said. "My team is scheduled to finalize a contract expansion next week, covering automated bias detection in customer service decisions." He looked directly at Tyler. "That product exists because moments exactly like this one keep happening." Nobody moved. A phone in row 4 caught every word. "The system can flag patterns," Marcus continued, his voice colder now. "It can detect when certain passengers are repeatedly questioned, moved, downgraded, or labeled disruptive despite holding valid documentation. But no software in the world can replace conscience in real time." Jessica's eyes dropped. Captain Holloway inhaled slowly. "Mr. Caldwell, I understand your concern." "No," Marcus said. "You understand the business risk now. The concern was visible 20 minutes ago, Captain." Holloway absorbed the hit. He deserved it. 3C Diane's voice came out smaller than before. "I didn't know who he was." Marcus turned toward her. "That is exactly the point," he said. The cabin seemed to stop breathing entirely. Marcus stepped into the aisle, no longer simply a passenger defending a seat, but a man holding up a mirror to everyone who had watched the wrong thing happen and waited to see how much power he had before deciding what was right. "You should not have needed to know who I was," he said. "You only needed to read the name printed on the boarding pass." Diane looked down. For the first time in the entire flight, she had no answer at all. Then his phone rang. The caller ID read board chair. Holloway saw it, so did Tyler, so did Jessica. Marcus answered. "Yes, Vivian," he said. A pause. Then his eyes lifted to the captain. "No, we have not departed." Another pause, his voice sharpening, because this airline just became the first live case study for the very technology they were planning to license from us. Vivian Marsh's voice stayed calm on the other end. The particular calm of a board chair already moving pieces before anyone else understood the game had started. "How many witnesses?" she asked. Marcus looked around the cabin. At least a dozen recording, possibly more. Crew names? Jessica Moore, Tyler Briggs, Captain David Holloway. He paused. Passenger involved, Diane Whitfield, seat 3C. Diane flinched when she heard her own name spoken that way. It sounded different now. Not like a complaint anymore. Like evidence. Vivian said something Marcus did not repeat aloud. His eyes never left Holloway's face. "Yes," he answered. Valid boarding pass confirmed. Passenger seated incorrectly admitted preference, not assignment. Crew attempted to move the correctly seated passenger instead. Jessica covered her mouth with 2 fingers. Tyler whispered, "We need to stop this." Holloway shot him a hard look. "No, we need to listen." It was the first entirely right thing he had said since stepping out of the cockpit. Marcus continued into the phone. "No, I don't want a public statement yet. Pull the draft contract. Freeze signature authority until legal completes a passenger treatment review. Also notify compliance. This may affect the bias detection rollout timeline." Tyler's face went pale. Freeze signature authority? The words weren't loud. They didn't need to be. They moved through first class like a draft of cold air slipping under a locked door. Holloway lowered his voice. "Mr. Caldwell, may I speak with your board chair?" Marcus looked at him. Why? The question was soft. Brutal. Holloway hesitated. To clarify the situation. "The situation was clarified the moment you looked at the boarding passes," Marcus said. Holloway absorbed that too. His shoulders dropped a fraction. "You're right," he said. That admission shifted the cabin again. Jessica looked up, surprised. Tyler looked startled. Diane looked almost betrayed, as if the captain owed his loyalty to her comfort rather than to the truth. Marcus held the phone away from his ear. "Captain Holloway would like to speak with you," he said, and passed it over. Holloway took it with both hands. "This is Captain David Holloway." He listened, his face tightening with every passing second. "Yes, ma'am. That's accurate." Another pause. "No, ma'am." Mr. Caldwell never raised his voice. He provided documentation immediately. "Yes, ma'am. The other passenger's assigned seat was 3C. His eyes moved briefly to Tyler. "Yes, ma'am. The crew attempted to resolve the conflict by asking Mr. Caldwell to move instead." Jessica closed her eyes. Holloway swallowed hard. "I understand," he said, and handed the phone back. Marcus took it. Vivian's voice came through faintly, sharp enough for nearby passengers to catch fragments. "We're convening an emergency review." Marcus ended the call. For several long seconds, no one spoke at all. Then Diane stood again, voice cracking. "This is insane. I made a mistake about a seat, and now he's trying to destroy people's careers." The silver-haired woman turned fully toward her. "No, ma'am. You made an assumption. Then you defended it. Then you said something ugly when the truth stopped working in your favor." "I didn't mean it that way," Diane said, eyes filling with angry tears. "People rarely do," Marcus said quietly. "That doesn't make it harmless." Jessica stepped forward, her own voice trembling. "Mr. Caldwell, I failed you. I knew the assignments were correct from the first 30 seconds. I should have asked Mrs. Whitfield to move immediately, no hesitation." Tyler shot her a warning look, but she pushed through it anyway. "I was afraid of delaying boarding," she said, "afraid of complaints, afraid of upsetting someone who flies this route every week." She turned to face Diane directly. "And I treated your comfort like it mattered more than his rights. I'm sorry. To both of you, but especially to you, Mr. Caldwell." The cabin went still in a different way this time, the silence not of shock but of something closer to respect. That apology had not been scripted. It cost her something to say, and everyone could hear it. Captain Holloway spoke next. "Mr. Caldwell, this aircraft will not depart until this incident is properly documented. I'll contact ground operations and request a supervisor." Tyler turned sharply. "Captain, that's going to blow our slot." Holloway's voice hardened. "We're already delayed by our own failure, Tyler." The words landed and stayed landed. Outside, a ground vehicle rolled slowly beneath the wing. Inside, the air felt charged, as if the aircraft itself understood it was no longer waiting for takeoff. It was waiting for accountability. Marcus finally stepped back into row 2 and sat down in seat 2A, his seat, the leather creaking softly under him. He set his father's duffel bag at his feet, looked straight ahead, and spoke without turning his head. "Bring the supervisor," he said. Then, colder, "and tell her to bring the incident log." The incident log arrived in the hands of a woman who looked like she had been pulled directly out of a crisis meeting mid-sentence. Carla Jennings, 49, ground operations supervisor, navy suit, tight bun, airport badge, swinging some against her chest as she climbed the jet bridge, with a tablet pressed to her side and visible worry stitched into the corners of her mouth. Captain Holloway met her at the galley. "Keep your voice low," he murmured. Carla glanced past him and took in the scene at once. The raised phones, the passengers leaning forward in their seats. Diane Whitfield, sitting rigid in 3C, Jessica pale near the aisle, Tyler staring at nothing in particular. Then she saw Marcus Caldwell seated calmly in 2A, and her expression shifted, not dramatically, just enough. "Mr. Caldwell," she said. The cabin heard it. Diane heard it. Tyler closed his eyes. Marcus turned his head slightly. "Ms. Jennings." "I was told there was a seating dispute," Carla said. "There was," Marcus answered. "Then there was a service failure. Then there was an ethical failure. Now there's a corporate issue." Carla's mouth tightened. She understood corporate language fluently, the way clean words could carry real consequences buried underneath them. Captain Holloway handed her the tablet with the seating records. Carla reviewed the assignments herself. 2A, Marcus Caldwell. 3C, Diane Whitfield. No ambiguity, no technical glitch to hide behind. She turned to Jessica. "Who first suggested moving Mr. Caldwell?" Jessica's voice came out barely above a whisper. "I did. Why?" Jessica looked at Marcus, then down at her own hands. "Because Mrs. Whitfield refused to move, and I thought asking him would be easier." Carla's eyes hardened. Easier for whom? Jessica had no answer for that either. Carla turned to Tyler. "And you escalated the situation?" Tyler straightened, clinging to whatever authority he had left. "I followed procedure. The passenger refused crew direction." "What direction?" Carla asked, reading the log. Tyler hesitated. "To move seats." "From the seat assigned to him to resolve the conflict," Tyler said. "That isn't a procedure," Carla said quietly. "That's pressure." The words cut clean through him. A few passengers murmured in quiet approval. The man recording in row 4 kept his phone up, but his expression had shifted from entertainment to something closer to shame. He had started filming for drama. He now understood with growing discomfort exactly what he had captured instead. Diane suddenly stood again. "I would like to say something." Carla turned to her slowly. "Mrs. Whitfield, I strongly recommend you sit back down." Diane ignored her. "This entire thing has been blown completely out of proportion. I made an honest mistake. He could have simply moved. People used to have manners in this country." The silver-haired woman laughed once, short and bitter. "Manners do not mean surrendering what already belongs to you." "I wasn't talking to you," Diane snapped. Marcus stood. The cabin quieted instantly. He did not raise his voice. He never needed to. "Mrs. Whitfield," he said, "you did not make an honest mistake when you saw your own boarding pass. You did not make an honest mistake when you called me an animal. You did not make an honest mistake when you decided this was about race. The moment things stopped going your way." "I was upset," Diane said, voice trembling. Marcus nodded once. "And when certain people get upset, they reveal exactly what they usually keep hidden." The sentence struck harder than any direct accusation could have. Carla looked down at her tablet, then over at Captain Holloway. "This aircraft is not departing until statements are taken," she said. Tyler's head snapped up. That could cost us our slot entirely. Carla stared at him, unmoved. We already lost something more important than a takeoff slot. For the first time, Tyler looked genuinely afraid. Not of Marcus. Of finally being seen clearly by people who mattered to his career. Carla stepped into the aisle and addressed the whole cabin. "Ladies and gentlemen, we apologize sincerely for the delay. We're documenting a passenger service incident in the forward cabin. Anyone who witnessed the exchange and is willing to provide a brief statement may do so through the secure link our system will send momentarily." Phones buzzed almost immediately as the airline's own system pushed the message out to every seat. Marcus noted the irony quietly. The same infrastructure his company had built was now gathering evidence against the very culture it was meant to help correct. Carla turned back to him. "Mr. Caldwell, our executive response team is requesting to speak with you before departure." Marcus checked his watch, an old steel piece that had belonged to his father, the crystal scratched along one edge from decades of factory floors and bus garages. "No," he said. "They can listen first." Carla blinked. "Listen to what?" Marcus looked around the cabin, at faces that had shifted slowly from curiosity to discomfort, to something closer to genuine awareness. "To the passengers," he said. He sat back down in 2A, his voice low and certain. "For once, let the people who actually saw it tell the company what happened, instead of the people who were trying to make it disappear." The first statement came from the silver-haired woman in row 3. Her voice shook at the start, then steadied. "I saw the boarding pass. I saw the crew confirm it themselves, and I watched them ask the wrong man to move anyway. One by one, others followed. The man in row 4 admitted he had started filming because he thought it would make for good drama online. Something to post and forget by morning." Then his voice cracked. "I'm ashamed it took me this long to understand what I was actually watching." A young mother near the aisle said he never once raised his voice, not even when she did. A retired teacher 2 rows back said Mrs. Whitfield's words had changed the entire mood of the cabin in a single sentence. Even a quiet businessman who had stayed silent through most of it finally looked up and said, "Our silence helped the wrong person win." Jessica stood near the galley, with tears she made no effort to hide. Tyler stood beside her, pale and rigid, the first man in that cabin to fully understand that authority without judgment was never leadership at all, only the appearance of it. Captain Holloway listened to every single statement, his face hardening with each one, as if hearing a verdict no courtroom would ever need to formally read aloud. Diane Whitfield sat in 3C with her hands knotted together in her lap, smaller now, not ruined, exposed. There is a real difference between the two. Ruin is something other people do to you. Exposure is simply what happens when the truth finally peels off the costume you'd been wearing. Carla sent the collected statements directly to the executive response team. Minutes later, her tablet chimed. She read the message twice before she spoke. "Mr. Caldwell, corporate has opened a formal review. Mrs. Whitfield has been removed from priority status pending investigation. Jessica Moore and Tyler Briggs will be placed on administrative leave following this flight. Vance Meridian is freezing the contract expansion until your team completes a full-service equity audit." Tyler closed his eyes. Jessica nodded through her tears, almost relieved to finally hear it said out loud. Captain Holloway turned to Marcus. "I failed to ask the right question soon enough. I'm sorry." Marcus studied him for a long moment. "Then make sure the next passenger doesn't need to own a company before someone believes them," he said. That sentence stayed in the cabin longer than any apology had. The flight finally departed nearly an hour behind schedule. As the aircraft climbed above the Colorado plains, The cabin lights dimmed, and the ground below dissolved into a web of distant gold. Marcus sat in seat 2A, quiet, composed, watching the clouds slide past the window. He had not won because he was wealthy. He had won because the truth had been sitting right there the entire time, printed plainly on a boarding pass, ignored by people who should have known better from the very first moment. 3 weeks later, Vance Meridian published the full results of its internal review, and what it found went far beyond a single flight. 2 prior complaints involving Diane Whitfield surfaced from the airline's own buried records, both filed, both flagged, both quietly forgotten. A pattern, not an accident. Jessica Moore completed a full retraining program and asked, on her own, to be reassigned to a route she chose specifically because of who flew it. Tyler Briggs did not return to the airline. Diane Whitfield was permanently removed from the carrier's loyalty program, her account flagged airline-wide. And months later, in a quiet local interview she gave almost no one asked for, she admitted, without excuses this time, that she had spent years mistaking other people's patience for her own entitlement, and that nothing about that morning had been a mistake at all, only the truth arriving in front of witnesses for the first time. Marcus never spoke publicly about what happened on that flight. He didn't need to. The boarding pass sat framed now in a small drawer in his office beside his father's old work boots laces still tied, a reminder that dignity was never something to be earned through achievement. It was something owed to every single person, long before anyone in the room ever learns their name.